Good afternoon. Welcome to Kenya News Update today. I'm your host, and we're diving deep into a story that's generating both hope and heated debate across the nation. The government has just released a massive 220 shillings million in business, startup capital to thousands of young entrepreneurs. This is a major injection of funds under the National Youth Opportunities Towards Advancement Fund, known as NYOTA. The money is specifically targeted at 3 counties in western Kenya: Siaya, Kisumu, and Homa Bay. President William Ruto presided over the disbursement event in Kisumu this past Monday, February 2nd, handing over funds to what the government says are 8,820 individual beneficiaries. On the surface, this is a story about opportunity, investment, and youth empowerment. As we'll explore in this 12-minute deep dive, the reality is far more complex. We'll look at the numbers, the political context, the potential impact, and the critical questions being raised about transparency, sustainability, and whether this model truly addresses Kenya's deep-seated unemployment crisis. We have multiple perspectives to consider today, so let's get started. Our first chapter, breaking down the numbers. What does 220 shillings million actually mean? Headline figure, but we need to understand its distribution. According to the government statement, this sum is divided among 8,820 beneficiaries. If we do the simple math, that works out to approximately 25,000 shillings per person. However, some reports suggest the actual grant per beneficiary is a slightly higher, standardized figure of 50,000 shillings. This discrepancy in the per-person amount is our first point of scrutiny. Is it 25,000 shillings or 50,000 shillings? The government's total figure and beneficiary count suggest the lower amount, but other communications hint at the higher one. This lack of crystal-clear accounting is a recurring theme in such programs. Let's assume for argument's sake the grant is 50,000 shillings. That means the 220 shillings million would only cover 4,400 people, not the stated 8,820. So, which is it? The precision matters because it speaks to the scale of support each young entrepreneur receives. Is 50,000 shillings sufficient seed capital to launch a sustainable business? Critics argue it's a drop in the bucket for most serious ventures, perhaps only enough for a very small-scale operation like selling vegetables or phone accessories. Proponents counter that it's a crucial starting point, a vote of confidence, and capital that these youths otherwise would have zero access to. Now, let's visualize the geographic distribution. The funds are concentrated in 3 neighboring counties: Siaya, Kisumu, and Homa Bay. This is not a nationwide rollout. It's a targeted regional intervention. Why these 3? Politically, this region has historically been an opposition stronghold. The timing and location of this disbursement, presided over by the president himself, inevitably draw questions about political motivation. Is this genuine development or a strategic patronage play ahead of future electoral cycles? Supporters of the administration would say it's about equitable development, bringing government resources to all regions regardless of past voting patterns. They'd point out that unemployment doesn't care about political affiliation, but skeptics see a pattern of using state funds to cultivate loyalty in specific vote-rich areas. This debate is central to understanding the story beyond the press release. Moving to our second chapter, the NYOTA Fund Promise and Precedent. The National Youth Opportunities Towards Advancement Fund is the latest in a long line of government-led youth empowerment and enterprise funds. We've seen UWIZO Fund, Youth Enterprise Development Fund, and others. Their records are mixed. While success stories exist, audits have frequently revealed issues with graft, poor repayment rates for loans, and a lack of rigorous business training and mentorship for recipients. The critical question for NYOTA is, what is different this time? Is it structured as a grant or a loan? The announcement calls it business startup capital, which is ambiguous. If it's a grant with no expectation of repayment, it's a direct cash transfer, which can be powerful but raises sustainability questions for the fund itself. If it's a loan, what are the terms? History suggests recovery rates on such government loans are poor, potentially making the fund a revolving door that eventually runs dry. Furthermore, the selection process for these 8,820 beneficiaries is shrouded in mystery. Out of how many applicants were they chosen? What were the criteria? Was it merit-based, need-based, or something else? Without transparent, publicly available criteria, allegations of favoritism and political gatekeeping are inevitable. Imagine a scenario where 50,000 young people in these 3 counties applied. The selection of just under 9,000 would then represent a highly competitive process, but we simply don't have that data. The government's communication focuses on the output, the disbursement, not the input. the application and vetting process. This opacity fuels public cynicism. Now, let's contrast this with a major international story that broke almost simultaneously, which brings us to our third chapter, A Tale of Two Headlines. As President Ruto was in Kisumu announcing the 220 shillings million for youth, a world away, the U.S. Justice Department was beginning to release millions of new pages from the Jeffrey Epstein files. This case, involving a convicted sex offender and financier with ties to global elites, continues to send shockwaves through American politics, even dogging President Donald Trump. You might wonder, what does a sordid American scandal have to do with Kenyan youth funds? The connection is in the headlines and the public discourse. Both stories, in their own ways, are about power, access, and accountability. The Epstein files release fuels a narrative about the wealthy and connected operating by a different set of rules, with secrets and impunity. In Kenya, when large sums of public money are dispersed with limited transparency, it can feed a similar, localized narrative of a political class distributing favors. Simultaneous timing creates a cognitive contrast for news consumers, one story about uplifting the marginalized, another about the misdeeds of the powerful. Critics of the NYOTA disbursement might use this global context to argue for extreme vigilance and transparency in how public funds are used, lest they become tools for patronage rather than progress. It underscores a universal demand. Citizens everywhere want to know how power and money flow, and who truly benefits. This leads perfectly into our fourth chapter, the sustainability debate, hand up or handout. Let's hear the perspectives. We have two guests joining us in spirit today. First, a supporter of the initiative. They would argue, this is exactly what the government should be doing. We have a youth unemployment crisis. Banks won't lend to young people without collateral. The NYOTA fund bypasses that. 50,000 shillings can buy a sewing machine, a welding kit, a stock of goods for a retail kiosk. It's not meant to build a factory, it's meant to start a journey. The economic multiplier effect is huge. These 8,820 businesses will create jobs for others, stimulate local economies in Siaya, Kisumu, and Homa Bay. We must start somewhere, and direct capital injection is a start. The president's personal involvement shows high-level commitment. Now, the skeptic's perspective. This is a classic, politically timed handout with a poor track record. Without rigorous business training, mentorship, and market linkages, a one-off cash injection is a setup for failure. Most of these businesses will fold within a year. The money will be consumed by immediate personal needs, not invested. We've seen this movie before with other funds. The lack of transparency on selection is the red flag. Who are these 8,820? Are they connected to local officials? The per capita amount is too little for meaningful enterprise, but just enough to create a sense of obligation. This is about building a voter base, not a business base. True empowerment requires systemic change, fixing the education system, improving infrastructure, and creating a genuine enabling environment for business, not sporadic cash drops. This is the core debate. Is the NYOTA fund addressing a symptom or the disease? The supporter sees it as a vital stimulus. The skeptic sees it as a politically convenient plaster on a deep structural wound. Both have valid points. The truth likely lies in the implementation details we cannot see. Which brings us to our final chapter, the path forward, accountability and measurement. For this program, or any like it, to gain public trust and achieve its goals, several things are non-negotiable. First, full transparency. The list of beneficiaries, with their locations and proposed business types, should be a public document. The selection criteria must be published. Second, robust support. The cash must be coupled with mandatory training in basic business management, bookkeeping, and digital literacy. Third, measurable outcomes. We need clear metrics tracked over time. How many of these businesses are still operational in 6 months? In 1 year? How many have created additional employment? What is their average revenue? Without this data, we are left with only the headline of the disbursement, not the story of its impact. The government should commit to publishing an impact assessment report in 1 year's time. That report should answer the hard questions. Did the 220 shillings million investment yield a positive return for the economy of those 3 counties? Did it change lives sustainably, or was it a temporary boost? The public has a right to know. In conclusion, the release of 220 shillings million to 8,820 young Kenyans is a significant event. It represents hope, opportunity, and a substantial allocation of resources. But in Kenya's complex socio-political landscape, such actions cannot be taken at face value. They exist within a context of historical patronage, ongoing unemployment, and a desperate need for tangible results. The true measure of this program's success won't be the photo op in Kisumu or the headline figure. It will be in the quiet, sustained success of thousands of small businesses months and years from now. It will be in whether those beneficiaries can look back and say the NYOTA fund was the genuine catalyst that launched their entrepreneurial journey. Until those results are in and publicly verified, the debate between hope and skepticism will rightly continue. The government has made its move. Now the ball is in the court of transparency, implementation, and long-term tracking. We will be watching. For Kenya News Update Today, I'm your host. Subscribe to Kenya News Update Today for more deep dive analysis.